Unlock incredible mental strength, 5 transformative secrets to Stoic mastery revealed. Rachel Jacobs stood in her kitchen, the air thick with the heat of a Midwestern afternoon, her hands trembling slightly as she poured a glass of water. The weight of her responsibilities pressed down like the humidity outside. 2 jobs, a restless child in the next room, and the haunting echoes of her grandfather's wisdom circling in her mind compounding the tension. Despite her determination to rise above her circumstances, the fear of financial ruin paralyzed her thoughts. She had stumbled upon that journal in the attic, a dusty relic of a man who understood profound despair. Each page held promises of empowerment and strategies for resilience. Yet every time Rachel envisioned standing up for herself at work, an oppressive dread gripped her. A featureless future hovered over her, suffocating her ambition with doubt. As she recalled the bitter looks of her colleagues at the diner when she mentioned wanting more for herself, anger mingled with constricting anxiety. Those who bore witness to her struggles reduced her to a stereotype, a single mother destined to remain confined within her small-town existence. The grinding monotony of her life filled her veins with a resignation she fought to resist. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Rachel's growing ambitions were undercut by a devastating revelation about her boss, the wealthy businessman who owned the grocery store where she worked. As whispers of his unethical practices reached her ears, the flicker of her newly found determination threatened to be extinguished. How could she jeopardize her job and the tenuous peace she had built for Ben? The cruel irony twisted within her, the very foundation of her income felt like quicksand beneath her feet. The afternoon faded into evening, the sky stained with streaks of orange that matched the tumult within her. She could hear Ben laughing in the backyard, a sound that twisted her heart, both a balm and a reminder of what was at stake. The erratic beat of her heart synced with the sight of her child, pure and unaware of the storm looming overhead. With every step closer to that luxurious office, where her fate and ethics would collide, an internal war raged. Thoughts tumbled through her mind, a cascade of intimidation and righteousness intertwined. Would she betray her principles for mere survival? Would the solace of complacency quiet the echo of injustice? A moment hung in the air, suspended between right and wrong, leaving Rachel caught in a liminal space where one decision might do irreparable damage or forge a new path. With shaking hands positioned against her slight hips, she steeled herself before the door, her breath shallow, her muscles taut with apprehension. The confrontation awaited her, a chasm filled with uncertainty stretching ahead. Would she find the courage to confront this man who had abused his power, or would the fear of the unknown paralyze her voice forever? In this pulse of hesitation, Rachel's world hung suspended, caught between the shadows of complacency and the flickering flame of her newfound purpose. Rachel inhaled sharply, her stomach swirling with a mix of resolve and doubt. As she pushed the office door open, a thin beam of golden light cascaded into the dim corridor behind her. She stepped inside, the familiar scent of polished wood and stale coffee inviting her into the lion's den. Her boss, Harold, was behind the desk, his eyes flicking up from the papers sprawled before him, an unsettling smile creeping onto his face. The very sight heightened Rachel's anxiety, and yet in that moment, she felt a flicker of something else, an electric pulse of determination that urged her forward. "Rachel," he greeted in a mockingly cheerful tone. "What brings you here today?" She straightened her back, pushing her trembling hands into the pockets of her apron. This moment was pivotal. She could either retreat into the shadows or confront the reality of his tyranny. "Harold, we need to talk." He leaned back in his executive chair, the smirk vanished, replaced by the practiced guise of authority. "About what?" "I hope you're not going to waste my time with complaints." "About the practices you've been employing at the store." Each word felt like a small victory against her self-doubt, each syllable edging away from complacency. His expression hardened, eyebrows knitting together as he fixed his stare upon her. "What's happening out there is none of your concern. Focus on your work, Rachel." The heat in her chest flared at his dismissive tone, igniting the tracks of her thoughts which held fast to her grandfather's words about courage and virtue. "It is my concern, Harold. I see how those practices are impacting our customers and employees. You're putting profits over their well-being." As she spoke, she felt weight begin to lift from her shoulders, a simultaneous fear and liberation coursing through her. Yet she also sensed the storm brewing behind his composed facade. He was not a man accustomed to being challenged, and the tension in the air thickened. "You think you can waltz in here and lecture me?" he asked, his voice dripping with condescension. "You have no idea what it takes to run a business. You're just a single mother trying to scrape by." His words cut deep, the underlying judgment echoing the very stereotypes she worked to escape. But while his comment stung, it transformed her resolve into an unbreakable armor. "I might be a single mother, but I'm not afraid to fight for what's right," she replied, her voice steady despite her trembling hands. At that moment, she felt empowered by the very vulnerability he sought to exploit. She realized that her struggles had created resilience and an understanding of street-level realities that few in his position could fathom. "Vulnerability is not weakness, Harold, it's the honesty most people hide from. It's what keeps communities whole," she asserted, feeling the pulse of her own truth invigorating her spirit. In his eyes, she could see the bulb of indignation flicker. Behind it loomed a menacing challenge, a warning that there would be consequences for her defiance. "But know this," he replied, lowering his voice, each word laced with a chilling threat. "You tread on very thin ice. Leave now while you can." Rachel's heart raced, but within that fear, a nascent flame of strength burgeoned. The confrontation was far from over. She was stepping into an unknown realm, ready to unveil the corruption that lurked beneath the surface, knowing full well it might cost her everything. Outside, the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows as she exited the office, her mind racing. This was just the beginning. With each step, Rachel could feel the gears of change shifting, her professional journey revitalized by a confrontation that had tested her resolve. What further sacrifices would she have to make? What hidden truths might she still uncover? The stakes were higher than she ever anticipated, and as the air cooled against her skin, Rachel knew she had to dive deeper into the murky waters of her own courage. The time had come to face the consequences of her actions, and they would not be light. The brisk evening air filled Rachel's lungs as she stepped outside, the weight of the confrontation still clinging to her. Each breath felt like a victory, the air tasted sweet with the promise of change. She began walking, her mind racing through the potential fallout from her bold stance against Harold. What could he do? Would he retaliate? She felt the gravity of her words lingering in the atmosphere, an electric hum that surged through her. Yet, amidst the swirling chaos of thought, there was a quiet ember of resolve flickering within her. As she walked the streets, Rachel's surroundings seemed more vivid than ever. The vibrant lights of the shops illuminating the sidewalk mirrored the excitement brewing in her. She visualized herself as a catalyst for change, not just within the store but perhaps in a larger context. What if her courage could inspire others? What if her defiance could ignite a spark within her colleagues? With her heart swelling, she entertained the reckless notion of rallying support, sparking discussions about integrity, ethics, and community among the employees. The sound of laughter floated through the air as she passed a couple of friends sharing an evening drink outside a cafe. The sight of their carefree camaraderie pulled at her heart. Would she ever be able to connect with others on that level again? It was a simple reminder of what she yearned for: a supportive community, a safe space to voice her thoughts without fear of reprisal. But how could she foster that at work when Harold had created an environment thick with dread? Ignoring the impulse to retreat back into solitude, Rachel decided to reach out. She texted Maya, a colleague she knew shared her concerns about Harold's practices. "Can we talk tomorrow? It's important." Waiting for a response felt like standing on the edge of a precipice, every second stretching into eternity. Would Maya understand? Would she even want to listen? As Rachel approached her home, the familiar sight of her front porch grounded her. There was a resilience woven into the fabric of her life, built from late nights juggling work and motherhood, nurturing her daughter while clawing after her dreams. She thought of Emma and knew she couldn't let the toxic practices continue unchecked. The principles she instilled in her daughter: integrity, fairness, Courage had to manifest not just in their household but also within the walls of the store. Settling down for the evening, Rachel sank into her favorite armchair, the soft fabric enveloping her, providing solace from the day's tensions. She needed a plan of the next day. She would meet with Maya. They would discuss the problems they were facing at work, explore ideas about forming a support system to stand up against Harold's leadership. But who else could join their cause? The thought sent a shiver through her. Every person they approached would walk a tightrope of risk alongside her. What would it take to mobilize a team against the oppressive regime Harold had established? She couldn't shake the creeping doubt about her own abilities to lead them. Yet, as doubt washed over her, she remembered the flicker of determination that had urged her into Harold's office. This same fire could guide her into uncharted territory, a realm where she might unlock the potential in herself and others to stand for what truly mattered. As Rachel formulated her strategy in her mind, a new concern began to gnaw at her. What if Harold caught wind of her intentions? What measures would he take to regain control? The boundary between bravery and recklessness blurred with each thought as she prepared to shift her narrative from that of a silenced employee to one of collective empowerment. How far was she willing to go to defend her values? As she embraced the gravity of the decisions ahead, one resolute belief emerged. There was no turning back now. The ripple effect of her confrontation was just beginning, and Rachel could sense the tide turning. Was she ready for the storm that was brewing? Rachel awoke the next morning to the soft peal of her alarm, the steady rhythm offering a familiar sense of comfort. But as she swung her legs over the edge of the bed, nerves sliced through the initial calm. Today was pivotal. She was no longer merely a submissive worker. She was beholden to a new narrative, one where her voice mattered, and her actions could yield significant impact. With determination tightening her core, she prepared for the day. Each movement in the routine was infused with a newfound purpose. As she applied her makeup, Rachel stared into the mirror, willing herself to recognize the woman before her, not the timid employee who tiptoed around turmoil, but a warrior poised to defend her values. Today, her strength was not just for herself but for those who might follow in her path. The hum of the city felt electric as she walked into work, each passing block heightening anticipation. She spotted Maya at the usual coffee spot in the break room, her dark hair bobbing with excitement and anxiety. Signaling a warm smile, Rachel approached, aware that they both stood on a precipice with ambiguous consequences. Maya, Rachel began, her voice steady despite the room's slightly oppressive atmosphere. Thanks for meeting me. I've been thinking a lot about what we can do together. Maya nodded, a glimmer of resolve sparking in her eyes. Given what we've seen, we need to find a way to stir things up. We can't let Harold continue this way. But how do you see this happening? Rachel took a deep breath, summoning the vivid visualization from the night before, a cluster of colleagues inspired to unify against the common threat. I think we start small, a gathering, maybe during lunch or after shifts. Share our experiences. If we can build trust among just a few people, it could snowball into something bigger. The idea hung between them like a tightrope stretched over a chasm. The uncharted territory beckoned but bore the weight of risk. Their environment was rife with surveillance, every utterance potentially leading to their undoing. Would their colleagues resonate with the urgency of the cause, or would Harold's shadow eclipse them yet again? What if we reached out to others we trust? Maya suggested, her brow furrowed with deliberation. It's about creating a culture of support, right? Rachel felt her heart leap. A culture of support. She had been so focused on resistance that she hadn't considered collaboration in a new light. This was not just standing against Harold, it was about fostering community in the environment he de-engineered for isolation. Anxiety crept back into her thoughts. What if Harold discovered their intentions before they even took flight? Would he retaliate? Past experiences pulled at her resolve, reminding her how quickly he could dismantle morale. But that didn't mean she would back down. Perhaps, she mused, a direct confrontation could ensure their voices would not be silenced. Rachel leaned closer to Maya, lowering her voice. We could approach a couple of those who have recently expressed displeasure about Harold's methods. If we craft a narrative together, we could amplify our voices. As they strategized, Rachel felt the embers of resolve morph beautifully into flames of ambition. She was no longer merely reacting to circumstances. She was the author of her fate, weaving an intricate tapestry of personal empowerment and collective resistance. But as the plan solidified, another fear coiled tightly around her. What if she led them straight into Harold's crosshairs? He had an uncanny ability for manipulation, turning allies into adversaries at a moment's notice. Internal conflicts surged through her, balancing the audacity of ambition with the dread of possible ruin. Could she handle the repercussions if things went south? This tug-of-war between her courage and the lurking fear reflected in her voice as she prepared to voice their new plan to the group. Was she truly ready to face Harold, to elevate their collective outrage to a point of no return? As the day wore on, Rachel realized the magnitude of her intentions. With every decision, she edged closer to a pivotal confrontation. The question remained, how far was she willing to push? The stakes were rising, and the air buzzed with tension. Would she shatter the chains of silence, or would fear crush her newfound determination? With every beat of her heart, the moment of truth loomed nearer. Rachel spent the morning pacing in her cubicle, a blend of anticipation and anxiety swirling within her. The stakes felt higher than they ever had, pressing against her chest like a weight she couldn't quite shake off. As minutes trickled by, each tick of the clock amplified her internal conflict. She was a ticking time bomb of ideals and resolutions waiting to erupt. She glanced around, studying the faces of her colleagues, drownings in their assigned tasks, unaware of the undercurrents brewing beneath the surface. Yet, what is rivalry without an enemy? Rachel recognized Harold's shadowy presence creeping into the periphery of her thoughts, ruining the clarity she desperately sought. Could one man's ambition suffocate the collective voice of the many? Determination surged. She retreated to the break room, feeling the need to collect her thoughts without the prying eyes of the office weighing her down. Coffee brewed in the background, filling the space with a rich aroma that momentarily comforted her frayed nerves. She leaned against the counter, breathing in deeply as she pulled out her phone and began drafting a message to Maya. Her fingers hesitated over the screen, heart pounding. What if she was steering them toward the lion's den? Leaving the safety of silence meant confronting not just Harold but the risks involved in challenging authority. The idea of facing Harold honestly made her consider the path of least resistance, but she shook her head, unwilling to let fear dictate her choices. With each passing second, Rachel's resolve crystallized. She pressed send, knowing she needed collaboration but also the courage to take the reins. They were not simply resisting, they were striving for a safer and more supportive workplace. Moments later, her phone buzzed back. Let us meet at 1 p.m. I've made a list of people who can join. Maya's enthusiasm radiated through the text, igniting a flicker of hope within Rachel. They weren't just imagining change, they were constructing a reality, one brick at a time. When noon struck, Rachel felt a buzz of adrenaline coursing through her veins, a concoction of fear and anticipation melding into a single driving force. She found Maya seated at a secluded table, a couple of familiar faces marking their territory around her. The nervous energy in the air was palpable. Hey, everyone, Rachel began, her voice steadier than she felt. I'm glad we could all gather today. With what has been happening in the office, it's become essential that we talk openly. Nods of agreement met her introduction, bolstering her confidence. In moments, their discussions lent voice to unspoken experiences, each story a chain link binding them into a collective strength. Rachel listened intently, absorbing the confessions of disenchantment and frustration. It was cathartic, illuminating their shared vulnerabilities and revealing glaring truths. As the atmosphere shifted from one of hesitation to palpable camaraderie, Rachel felt empowerment flood her senses. She wasn't just watching the tide turn, she was wielding the currents herself. Then, Maya raised a hand and looked at everyone with resolute eyes. We need to put a plan in place. If we're being honest, Harold won't sit idle as we gather momentum. Shivers of realization danced down Rachel's spine. She understood the implications. The thought of having a strategy laid bare made her stomach twist in knots but also invigorated her spirit. Yes, Rachel pressed on, her voice comfortable in the evolving collective. We need to document our experiences, ensure everything is clear and factual, and approach HR with our demands for a healthier workplace. A collective murmur of agreement swept through the group, and for the first time, Rachel felt she was no longer just speaking into an abstract void. But what if Harold retaliates? One colleague nervously posed, the excitement instantly dimmed by the threat of confrontation that awaited them. Rachel felt that familiar weight again, but she looked around at the group, gathering her thoughts. We need to be prepared for pushback. But every step we take is a step toward recapturing our power, she replied, heart racing. The room hummed with a mix of apprehension and excitement as they plotted and planned, but as Rachel glanced out the window, the weight of the upcoming battle settled uneasily in her gut. A confrontation was inevitable, and she was finally ready to embrace it, yet the clouds of doubt loomed ominously. Could they really challenge a man who thrived on undermining their confidence? The moment of truth was fast approaching, and with it, a chance to either secure their futures or spiral deeper into a cycle of despair and intimidation. Rachel inhaled deeply, steering her thoughts back to the task at hand. Let us finalize our approach. We need to choose our words carefully. Harold's listening. Was she truly prepared to uplift her voice against Harold, and if so, at what personal cost? The day had morphed into a crucible of potential, and she stood at the precarious edge ready to leap, but what if the fall was all-consuming? Rachel stood at the brink of uncertainty, her heart pounding with the weight of her decision. The group rallied around her, their faces illuminated by a shared determination. Yet, as the veils of camaraderie thickened, so too did the threads of anxiety woven deep within her psyche. Could she truly lead them into what could very well be a storm? The room buzzed with ideas, strategies, and hope. Rachel shifted her focus from the swirling thoughts in her head to the faces before her, each one reflecting her own fears and aspirations. It struck her that this gathering was more than a tactical meeting, it was a transformative moment. Harnessing their collective voice would require not just courage but also a resolve to stand resilient in the face of adversity. All right, she said, cutting through the unrest that threatened to re-emerge. We face a calculated risk, but we must prepare for every possible scenario. Her tone was firm now, the nervous energy morphing into a palpable sense of urgency. Let us create a timeline for our approach and document our evidence meticulously. How we present our case is just as crucial as the content itself. Maya nodded appreciatively, and Rachel noticed the glimmer of respect that crossed her features. The idea of being seen as a leader, rather than merely a follower, pushed Rachel's pulse up another notch. Yet, self-doubt flickered just beneath the surface. Did she genuinely have it within her to challenge Harold and not back down? We need to emphasize our collective experiences without alienating anyone, another colleague suggested, speaking with more confidence than he had earlier. Yes. That's it, Rachel said, excitement bubbling within her. We need to frame our narratives around the need for collaboration and improvement. This isn't just about cries of injustice but about constructive solutions. As Rachel elaborated on the nuances of strategy, she began to see the contours of her leadership emerging. She had always shied away from conflict, preferring to remain in the shadows of her peers. Yet, standing here, guiding her colleagues through their concerns, felt oddly empowering. With every suggestion and every look of affirmation, she transformed into a figure who could ignite change. The discussions continued, each proposal layering on top of the last, but with each heartbeat, the specter of Harold loomed even larger. He was experienced, formidable, and accustomed to quashing dissent with a flick of his wrist. What if they failed? What if their combined voice was swallowed whole in the cacophony of the office politics? Rachel shook her head, expelling those thoughts like dark smoke. Let us also consider potential counterarguments Harold may use. We need to anticipate his moves, Rachel pressed. This is more than just about us, it's about protecting our values and integrity. The room fell silent, absorbing the weight of her words. Rachel could feel the eyes on her, evaluating her strength, her capacity to lead. The questions turned inward, forcing her to confront her insecurities. Would this be her defining moment of valor, or would it lead to the unraveling of everything she had built? As they drafted their approach, Rachel painstakingly crafted each word on their plans, knowing they could craft their narrative but not predict the reactions. The tangible tension in the room thickened, as they began to grasp the magnitude of their mission. Okay, she said at last, glancing around and gauging their readiness. We're standing on the cusp of something significant, but we need to support each other through this. Her voice softened, carrying a sense of solidarity with the group, though fear shimmered in her eyes. Could this newfound purpose help her find the strength to overcome her own insecurities? As they disbanded, a haunting stillness settled in. Rachel knew what lay ahead could ruin her profession or fortify her spirit, and that uncertainty trailed after her as she ventured back to her desk. The emails piled up, the mundane dangers of office life loomed large, yet she held something far more vital. Now resolved, the clock ticked mercilessly. The time had finally come to confront Harold. The moment she once dreaded now transitioned into one of profound anticipation. Would she emerge as a leader, or would the confrontation reveal her fragility? Rachel took a deep breath, striding into her cubicle with a greater sense of purpose. Confidence surged, and with it, a chilling reminder of the fragile nature of change. Little did she know, Harold had already begun to strategize a counterattack in the shadows, and his influence would soon unfurl in ways she hadn't imagined. With each tick of the clock, the stakes intensified. How far was she willing to go to protect not only her voice but also the voices that now amplified across the office? Would her leadership be enough to confront the darkness ahead? With that thought in mind, she prepared to face the consequences, setting the stage for the confrontation that would define her journey and test her limits. Rachel returned to her desk, the layers of adrenaline coursing through her veins, mingling with the stubborn edges of doubt. Each keystroke felt like an echo of her earlier resolve, and yet, the palpability of her mission loomed larger than the work at hand. She couldn't afford to slip into complacency, not now. The tension was tangible, spinning like a web around her, waiting to ensnare her confidence. As the hours passed, the environment shifted, whispers floated through the aisles, and each glance from her colleagues was charged, laden with expectations. Rachel could sense the ripple of her decisions making waves beyond her immediate circle. It was exhilarating and terrifying. She felt like a tightrope walker without a safety net, balancing precariously between potential triumph and catastrophic failure. Finally, she decided to dissect her own motivations. Why had she allowed fear to dictate her actions for so long? Could her desire for approval from superiors like Harold be more paralyzing than empowering? Pulling open a drawer, Rachel discovered a worn notebook, one she had used during her first months at the company. As she flipped through the pages, she was struck by how much she had yearned for validation. Anchoring herself to others' expectations had stifled her growth. With each page she turned, revelations unfolded, the sketches of dreams mingled with lists of things she feared. The self-doubt that had once felt so insurmountable suddenly appeared as a fleeting shadow. Rachel's fingers itched to write again, to articulate the newfound convictions swirling in her mind. She grabbed a pen and began drafting what she would say to Harold when the decisive moment arrived. As she wrote, her narrative crystallized. It was time to challenge not just Harold but the ideal of perfection she had placed upon herself. She no longer wanted to walk in the shadows, it was time to step into the light, even if it cast a sharp glare on her insecurities. The afternoon quieted, and the hum of the office became a white noise that faded into the background. Layers of her former self peeled away. She was no longer the timid employee afraid of confrontation, she was now a catalyst for change. It was both exhilarating and intimidating to grasp this shift. She picked up her phone, contemplating whether to speak to Maya or another ally who could provide feedback on her plans. She felt the weight of her decision crystallizing. By seeking counsel, would she be solidifying her leadership or revealing doubt? Rachel decided to call Maya. "I need to run some points by you. I want to ensure we're on the same page before tomorrow," she said, her voice steady. As Maya listened, Rachel felt each word strengthen her resolve. They were more than just tactical maneuvers, they were a manifesto of their commitment to equity and respect at work. With every affirmation Maya offered, Rachel's confidence seemed to deepen. Later, however, doubt seeped in once more. After hanging up, she pondered the potential backlash from Harold. Would he dismiss her ideas or, worse yet, manipulate them to his advantage? An unsettling picture formed in her mind of him diluting her carefully tailored messages into mere whispers. She wrestled against the anxiety curling in her stomach and forced herself to breathe, to ground her thoughts. Failure was merely a precursor to growth, she reminded herself. With newfound clarity, Rachel understood that the greatest obstacle was her perception of Harold's power. It struck her, leadership did not always mean winning, sometimes, it could also mean navigating treacherous waters with grace and asserting one's worthiness to be heard. As the clock approached the end of the workday, the stakes felt invincible. Rachel realized she was not just about to confront a colleague, she was challenging a long-standing narrative that had confined her. Would she stand steadfast in her newfound perspective, or would the specter of Harold's dominance haunt her when the moment came? With determination stealing her, she returned to her desk and reviewed her notes. Once more, channeling all her fear into her preparation. She was ready to meet the storm. But little did she know, before she could even voice her objections, Harold was already plotting to undermine her in ways she could never foresee. Would her readiness be enough to confront the storm brewing in the corners of their office? Rachel took a deep breath, feeling the air fill her lungs with the taste of impending confrontation. The office had grown emptier as her colleagues trickled out, each absorbed by their own lives and the distractions of the evening. The fluorescent lights buzzed softly, mirroring the whirlwind inside her mind. She had spent the last few hours preparing her speech for Harold, mentally rehearsing every word, every possible response from him. The stakes felt inescapably high. With each review of her notes, she recognized that her message was not just about addressing issues within their team, it was a declaration of her intent to rise beyond the confines of her previous role as just another cog in the corporate machine. A rush of excitement tinged with trepidation surged in her chest. But as the clock continued to tick down the minutes, doubts resurfaced. What if Harold found a way to twist her words? He had a knack for manipulating narratives to suit his agenda. She imagined his dismissive smirk and the condescending way he often belittled her ideas in front of others. Would she falter under that glare? Rachel dragged her fingers through her hair and tried to ground herself. It became clear that she wasn't merely fighting for her projects, but for her identity. She needed this moment to redefine herself, and that realization held a powerful sway. Living in fear of others' opinions had been a cage. It was time to reclaim her agency, but doing so felt like stepping into an unknown realm. She reached for her notebook again, her pen poised over a blank page. Every thought that challenged her resolve clawed at the edges of her concentration like an impatient child tugging at her skirt. The need to succeed wouldn't just placate her fears, it would serve as the torch that illuminated the path ahead. Rachel scribbled her intentions down furiously, choosing clarity over perfection. I am worthy of being heard. I am capable of leading, she wrote, her own words warming her heart. Harold's approval does not define my potential. Each statement resonated deep within, casting sunlight on the corners where doubt had once lived. With her thoughts organized, Rachel stood to stretch, deliberately taking in her surroundings. The hum of the office turned into a backdrop against the drama playing out in her mind. She could feel the walls urging her forward, reminding her that she was part of this workplace. She deserved to shape its direction just as much as anyone else. Maya walked past her desk just then, pausing and offering an encouraging nod. You ready? She asked, her voice laced with tentative optimism. Rachel summoned a smile. Almost. I thought I saw Harold leave, Maya added, tilting her head as if to gauge Rachel's confidence. You're prepared? Yes, I know what I need to say. Rachel's words felt steadier now. Good. Just remember, you're not alone. We're all invested in this. As Maya walked away, Rachel felt the warmth of camaraderie fortify her resolve. Yet, a flicker of anxiety remained. A part of her still questioned if today would be the day she finally broke free, or if she would be cast back into the shadows of doubt. She turned back to her notes, focusing on her own reflections, someone ready to embrace discomfort for the sake of growth. It was her last chance to remind herself that true leadership emerged not from the absence of fear, but from facing it head-on. Just then, her phone buzzed sharply on her desk, its glow cutting through the gloom. A message from Maya flashed across the screen. Harold's meeting might be with someone else first. Are you ready whenever he calls? Rachel's heart raced. Time was running out, the storm brewing just beyond her grasp. What if he confronted her with his plans before she even got the chance to share her own? As she steadied her breath, a new resolve formed in her chest. She wouldn't wait for the perfect moment, she would forge it from the uncertainty. With a silent vow to herself, Rachel prepared for the tumultuous conversation that awaited, the winds of change beginning to swirl around her. The moment of truth was closer than she realized. The office door creaked open, pulling Rachel from her thoughts. As she turned, Harold stepped inside, the familiar air of authority surrounding him like a cloak. His gaze fell upon her, an inscrutable mix of curiosity and challenge hidden beneath his polished exterior. The sight sent a ripple of uncertainty through Rachel, but she quickly suppressed it. This was the confrontation she had prepared for, and now, it was time to transition from the spectator of her career to its protagonist. "Rachel," Harold said, his tone as smooth as the suit he wore, "I didn't expect to find you still here. What's on your mind?" The moment hung heavily in the air, every second felt magnified as Rachel fought the instinct to shrink back. Instead, she stood firm, recalling her intentions. She was worthy, capable, and ready to lead. With deliberate calm, she spoke, "I wanted to discuss some pressing challenges we've been facing in the team." Harold's smirk was barely perceptible, but Rachel caught it, an instinctual reaction she had come to recognize. She felt the old self, the one that retreated when faced with his smugness, wanted to surface, but she steered herself right back into her intent. "It's important that we address these issues, not only for current projects but for the morale of the team moving forward." As she spoke, she watched Harold transform, his amusement replaced by the calculating look he often masked behind charm. "Do you think those issues are really that significant? Or is this another way for you to assert your presence?" There it was, the challenge, sharpened to a point. Rachel took a breath, grounding herself in her resolve. "I believe they are significant, and I understand that change can feel threatening. But if we acknowledge these issues and work towards solutions, we can strengthen our productivity and collaboration." Each word felt like armor covering her heart, hardening her decision not to falter. Harold's eyes narrowed slightly, and for a moment, Rachel felt the weight of his scrutiny. She prepared for the sting of rejection that often accompanied his responses. But instead of retreating, something shifted. She began to see around him. This wasn't just a conversation about work or leadership. It was about her potential to redefine her professional narrative against an adversary who thrived on underestimating her capabilities. "Let's say I indulge your ideas, what's your plan?" Harold's condescension was still woven into his phrasing, but it no longer intimidated her. "I propose regular feedback sessions that include all team members. Open dialogues can foster transparency and innovation. Also, I want to discuss how we can further empower junior staff, give them opportunities to lead discussions and present their ideas." Rachel leaned forward, driven by a newfound confidence that surged as she considered the impact of such initiatives. For the first time, the slight twitch of Harold's mouth appeared to waver. He was processing her words, not driven by his desire to dismiss, but perhaps sensing a legitimacy he hadn't anticipated. "I see," he replied, his voice shifting ever so slightly. "But you really think they'll embrace this? Change is difficult, especially in our environment." "Yes." Rachel felt a switch in her internal narrative. Rather than focusing on potential failure, she allowed herself to entertain the possibility of success. Ultimately, people want to feel valued. Their contributions matter. She could perceive the invisible wall separating them begin to thin with each passing second. Her earlier fears started dissolving. She realized that her fears had been holding her back more than Harold ever could. Rachel was ready to assert herself deliberately and authentically, not just for her team, but for her own evolution. "Well, I suppose we can explore this further," Harold said finally, a calculated neutrality replacing his former bravado. "Send me the details, and we'll take it from there." As he turned to leave, Rachel felt an exhilarating rush. She had not only confronted him, but she had also articulated her vision with clarity. And proposed constructive change. The encounter was not without its risks, yet Rachel emerged feeling more empowered than ever. She was aware that true growth often lay just past the threshold of discomfort. Now, standing alone in her office, she reflected on the shift that had taken place within her. Just before she could revel in silver linings, a nagging thought clawed at her: what other parts of her professional life demanded similar confrontations? What new challenges awaited beyond this door? That question hung in the air. Her journey had only just begun. Rachel stood in the glow of the setting sun, the burnished colors flooding the office with a warmth she had longed for. The confrontation with Harold had been a turning point, not simply for the team dynamics but for Rachel herself. She realized she was no longer defined by the fear of intimidation. She was a woman with a clear mission, armed with both courage and insight. With the office soon to empty and the last echoes of her colleagues' chatter dwindling, she felt a profound sense of freedom wash over her. The weight she had carried for so long began to lift. She had delved into her vulnerability and discovered a bedrock of strength that anchored her newfound purpose. Rachel's ambition wasn't just to challenge Harold's practices, it was now to reshape her environment based on values that mattered. Drawing a deep breath filled with all the triumphs of the day, she opened her laptop, a new document blinking on the screen. It was filled with the action plan she'd envisioned, a strategic roadmap for her colleagues to engage openly about the issues at work. She felt confident that together, they could foster an atmosphere where integrity and collaboration thrived. Her vision extended beyond herself. Rachel understood true change lay in empowerment and collective advocacy. Over the next few days, Rachel meticulously organized sessions that invited feedback from the team. Each meeting was infused with her genuine hope that every voice mattered. When she witnessed even the quietest colleague speak up, Rachel felt another layer of her own timidity peel away, replaced with an exhilarating belief in the potential of others. As a metaphorical dam broke, the office transformed. Conversations flowed freely, colleagues rallied support, and a culture of shared responsibility and respect blossomed. Days turned into weeks, and with every shared idea, a new framework replaced the toxic silence Harold had instilled. She observed Harold become increasingly vexed by her community-driven approach. No longer dismissed as merely an underperforming worker, Rachel had established herself as a leader. Feedback sessions became forums for creativity. The office buzzed with a revitalized energy. Rachel's resolve had kindled a shift in the workplace. Through vulnerability came exquisite strength, and change, once thought unattainable, had arrived like a breath of fresh air. In a decisive meeting with HR to address Harold's practices, Rachel presented an exhaustive report, backed by her colleagues' testimonials. The external validation was undeniable. The acknowledgement of what they had achieved together opened doors she never imagined possible. Professional recognition followed swiftly. She was awarded a position to lead a new project, one that focused on inclusivity and ethics in customer service. Standing before the mirror that morning, she applied her makeup with a steady hand, watching the woman staring back. With every stroke, she marveled at how far she had come both as a professional and a person. Her days were no longer laced with anxiety, they thrummed with purpose. Rachel had seized her narrative and shaped it into one of tenacity, clarity, and achievement. Confidence settled in her posture, and a smile crept across her face. Today, she would address the wider team not just about project goals, but about recognizing the power of collective voices. This moment was not simply about professional success, it was about honoring the lessons learned during her struggles, affirming her ability to inspire resilience within others. As the meeting commenced, Rachel stood before her colleagues, her heart soaring. She shared not just statistics but stories, their stories. She expressed gratitude for the journey they had embarked upon together, emphasizing how each one had contributed to this trajectory of change. With every word she spoke, Rachel proved it was possible to conquer fear with purpose. Vulnerability had woven its way into her narrative, and it strengthened her, bolstered by peers willing to lean on each other's strengths. She had transformed, not in spite of her challenges, but because of them, and her achievements echoed that truth. As the applause rang out at the close of her presentation, an undeniable sense of fulfillment enveloped her. Each cheer resonated with validation, and as the weight of her former self dissipated, Rachel understood one fundamental truth: she had successfully navigated both her professional circumstances and personal insecurities. And she had emerged not just unscathed, but deeply empowered. This was her moment of triumph. Now, with restless excitement, she would continue to embrace her purpose. She had proven herself capable and had lit the path for others to follow. Rachel smiled a smile that reflected the journey of tenacity and transformation. A new chapter awaited her, fueled by the knowledge that she was worthy not only to be heard but to lead. Join Rachel in her adventure, and if you want to be a part of more riveting journeys of personal transformation, you need to subscribe now. Don't wait even one more second. Leave a like to feed the algorithm, comment your thoughts on Rachel's growth, and share this with at least 5 friends who need to feel the power of change. This is the moment to show your support for unstoppable stories of overcoming and achievement.